5. Any agenda amendments?
Well, I spoke to you before. I need to go to a select board meeting and leave at 6:30. So if there's any way to do the superintendent discussion at the top of the meeting, and if you want to do the Act 46 pieces, that way you won't have to rush anything, because I know you have a long agenda and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Comments and correspondence. I haven't received anything. Has anybody else? Brian, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
On the budget, Bob, so we're going to discuss that.
Yes.
And on the bond thing?
We have, yeah, we're going to be discussing that as well. It'll probably tie into our, not the bond, but the budget will probably tie into our Act 46 update as well, because I'm sure maybe it's changed things. Maybe not.
Oh.
But, okay.
So we'll talk about it.
So, approval of December 11th board meeting minutes. Did you get a chance to look at those, Sean?
I did. I will make a motion to approve the December board meeting minutes.
I will second. Any changes or discussion? All those in favor of approving the December 11th board meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll move on to you, Julie.
Sure. So the superintendent's report is sort of the Act 46 update. We had been focused on our organizational meeting for Highgate, Franklin, and Swanton, and that has been put on hold due to an agreement between the litigants in the appeal of the State Board of Ed decision on mergers and the Attorney General's office. So that came to us yesterday afternoon, and I know you're aware because you get the information from that group because you've signed on as folks in the litigation. What is interesting is, if you recall, early advice about signing on to this was if there's an injunction, it will affect everyone. But this delay is only impacting towns that have signed on to the litigation. So those districts that didn't choose have to hold their organizational meetings by January 29th or whatever that date was. So those of us that are in, like in Sheldon's case, the easier example is the Franklin, Highgate, Swanton towns can't hold an organizational meeting now until I believe it's the 18th of February. And so that will delay budgets, it will delay board members being elected, it will delay even the voting on amending articles of agreement, all work that that body wants to do. And that's actually okay, because it gives people a little more time for planning. Sheldon is in a different circumstance, of course, that the Northern Mountain Valley Unified School District, is that right? Has already exists, and you've been appointed as members of that board, both by the select board, and this board agreed with it and made a motion. Yet, I understand that they are going through a meeting that is like an organizational meeting, and that this agreement, I don't want to call it a stay or anything like that, that confuses folks, but this agreement may very well affect Northern NMVU from forming as a 4-district group. Not forming, you still have to go through with the merger activity, but that meeting taking place may be delayed. And I don't know, that would be for Franklin Northeast and that board to get legal advice about what the implications are for negotiate anything. Yeah. But it's certainly complicating factors, but what is important for people to understand is it is not the injunction, and it is not a stay. Only a judge or the legislature can say you won't merge or pause with merger activities, go back to the old way of doing things. So at this point, both the Sheldon budget process and the Franklin Northwest Unified District process is still on that merger track, but there's no ability. I don't know the end, but it will definitely, there will be impact to things like town meeting budgets and things like that. What we do know that we will do for Sheldon is we will be able to have a warning for your bond should you determine that you're going to do that. We weren't going to be voting on any board members because that was appointed. Was that correct?
I think it's just temporarily appointed,
Right.
though.
For the Northern Mountain.
Yeah.
So at town meeting day, we're supposed to be voting
Oh, that's right. And
because we're temporary.
that's correct.
And so we're supposed to be voting for the permanent members, but that all becomes hazy and fuzzy if there is an injunction or
Right.
anything like that.
Right.
What do we do at
So
that
if
point?
so for example, I spent a good part of today trying to figure out how Swanton and Highgate and Franklin would vote on their new board members on town meeting day, given this bump of the organizational meeting. Until I was told by the agency of ed, with one of those, of course, can't do that because there's no newly sworn in group to warn that meeting, to
Right.
warrant, to approve that warning. So that may be the case for you in Sheldon, because if there's a delay in their organizational meeting, quasi-organizational meeting,
Yeah.
they may or may not have the authority to then have the Sheldon voters vote on a slate of board members by Australian ballot. I don't know the answer to that. That's something that they're going to have to figure
Yeah.
out. But it could potentially impact whether there's a special meeting later, or whether you've just signed on for a longer temporary stint. I don't know.
Yeah.
Carefully back up.
Yeah.
I like how you said that.
I don't know.
Right.
There's more unknowns than there are knowns, but that's why today we're expecting guidance on the more traditional imposed mergers this week, but I don't know that they were going to have specific to Sheldon and Montgomery kinds of advice. So because it's not how they've been thinking all this
Right.
time. So that's why I called our school attorney's office, and they represent both bodies. So, I wanted to get a little preview of what this meant for Sheldon.
Did they have any?
Just what I said,
Yeah.
that
They don't know.
even though they don't technically have to organize, they've been working on some process that's very similar.
Okay.
So, and it's tough. It's uncharted territory.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I didn't get to go back through, but like this morning or yesterday, there was some email that I just received that, because the initial thing that we were getting was, don't meet at all.
Right.
But there was something that came back that changed, backed up on that, saying you can voluntarily meet if you want to. And then I wanted to get into the details because you didn't have to follow the representation. So in theory, we have 2 members, but all 3 of us could go to that board and represent Sheldon because it's voluntarily, it's meeting, so you don't even have to have the 2 members. But I didn't get back into it to read the details exactly, but I got something like they're moving away because they understand that by not meeting at all, and then if all of this crashes down on us, then the timelines don't change, it's going to be putting these new districts in a very difficult situation to get everything organized. But I don't know what that means to, like you said, the elections and all of that stuff. That's
Great.
I think what they were saying was that we could meet as 2 boards. So like
Right.
the Sheldon board could meet with the NMV board, but I don't know how that works I guess if we did that, the Sheldon board would have to go, we'd warn it as a Sheldon meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm wondering, since
And
so we're technically, well, we're not technically because we haven't been sworn in, but we are representatives on the NMB board, supposed, or
Right, you've been appointed.
appointed, yeah. If we are there as Sheldon board members, what does that do to their quorum? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And again, our school attorneys, have, the advice coming from the folks heading up the litigation have a particular focus.
Right.
And then our school attorneys are trying to give you their best advice about education law and what that could mean, because they have more experience there. So they're coming at it from different, and again, you get lots of advice, then you have to decide what you're going to do. There's always a risk, if you don't attend, that those seats are vacant and they can just appoint people, and then there's nobody representing Sheldon. Appoint the vast lineup of people that are signing up to run for school boards. I mean, that's part of the challenge. There aren't a lot of people stepping up, and it's wonderful that you guys are going to multiple meetings in multiple districts. It's a lot. And I know that you're wanting to pursue the litigation faithfully and not set up your teachers in school for lack of success either. It's a balance.
Yeah, trying to do what's best in both directions,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
so I think because there's a meeting Monday.
Right.
So I think we'll have to just wait and see how this pans out over the next few days to determine whether that meeting is.
I will email you Sean Tui's email. I'll just send an email to you, CCing him, and then you could ask him because he's working with both districts. I think he can probably have give advice that covers both.
Yeah.
And hopefully,
then
Lynn told us she's trying to figure out what it means.
Yeah.
Right.
So on her end, she's
that's
trying to
what
figure
we're
out what
doing.
that means. Also, I mean, just like you said, we got an email from Lynn right after yours, on the same thing, and just trying to figure out what does that mean for us.
Right.
What's kind of interesting though, and I know that the landscape has changed just recently, but at the last NMB board meeting, Lynn had contacted the lawyer to see what a quorum was.
Right.
Because her question was, is our full board representation 8? Or is it not 8?
Right.
Right? So is it 2 from each? Or is it a different number? And so that whole going there as voluntary versus not going there as well. The lawyer shared with her, your full board is 8, your quorum is 5.
Okay.
Right? And so that was their interpretation. So at that particular meeting, there wasn't a quorum, right? So it wasn't an official meeting. But that was the information that she got last month, right? And so, again, the landscape has changed a little, but that particular information was different than what you had just talked about. So perhaps it depends on where you are, what the answer is,
Because
or what you want the answer to be.
Oh my goodness.
Even really, your particular interpretation,
Right.
is always going to be biased as to what it is that you
Yeah.
are trying to get.
So it definitely puts Lynn and Blackman in a precarious situation because.
Right.
Well, as he said to me this morning about another issue, they give advice. He can give advice for this scenario or perspective or outcome, and for this one. And then a lot of times people just say, oh, well, we're going to go do this other thing that we think is a good idea. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. All you can do is advise, and, that's, I'm sure he can give, I sent that email now so I didn't forget after going to another meeting. Ask the questions, and he'll let you know from a Sheldon, I'm in this litigation perspective, and I'm sure he'll give you the perspective of the NMB USD as well. So all you can do is ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
It will mean, though, so, so often now we're compartmentalizing the new unified district and Sheldon and NMBU. The implication around this delay also is that there will be no town meeting budget votes, even if an injunction comes next week, because we won't really have time to do that. And it's very unlikely that they will, because they've been granted this time for a purpose. I don't even know all the specifics of what they intend to get out of this month. Obviously, they're not going to get a decision in a month, but maybe just motions on both sides gives them time to clarify some of that. I know the judicial waiver needs to be discussed, and they probably want some time around that. But the time for the organizational meeting, no matter what it looks like on each side, needs to occur before we can do a budget, and there's no time to prepare budgets for the deadlines for printing and warnings and things like that, because we currently don't have authority to do that. So no matter what, we would have a special meeting for budgets, unless NMVU may be able to prepare for a town meeting vote. That, I don't know. That's in the more questions than answers category.
Yep.
So, if there is not an injunction granted before the end of this month, which is when our warnings need to go out, I guess if there is an injunction granted, we will be warning as Sheldon.
Yes, but it wouldn't be for town meeting because we wouldn't have enough time. If it had happened this week, we would have had enough time to prepare things for town meeting. The printers, the deadlines for things to get to the printer are, some towns it's later in January, but it's still it's still too close to do a thoughtful budget.
Okay. So we won't have even a Sheldon specific budget for town meeting. Interesting. So maybe I will, or maybe you guys know what that will mean for town meeting day in terms of because we always break at lunch and then we have a school meeting in the afternoon.
That'll be, if you vote to put an article for a bond, that will be what's on that. And then I don't know if there would be an Australian ballot for, that's the other district's question.
Okay.
So we're going through, that's why I'm going
She's
to
gonna
one of
take
the
little
town
baby
select boards
steps.
today, because it's confusing enough.
Yeah.
And it just continues to get that way.
Okay. All right. Stay tuned.
So do you want to talk about the waiver objection piece next, since we're sort of on the Act 46?
Sure. So,
Or the updates on the litigation? I don't know if you know more.
not any more than what we've just discussed, other than a judge has been chosen or potentially chosen. So Mary Miles Teachout is the presiding judge at this point. However, we have received a resolution for to waive any objection to the presiding judge based on sounds like a variety of things, but a couple family members on boards or attending schools that are part of the litigation, and the advice of the attorneys who are representing us is that it's not not something that we really would be worried about, and that likely any judge based on the number of schools, may
Mhm.
have a conflict. So they were comfortable with us signing it if it is this board's will. We can make a motion to sign it and send it off. They need it by Friday.
I will say I did bring that up to our attorneys too, just because one of the things that it was asking is that the boards would seek legal counsel around this. So I said, are you aware of any problem of this? You know, and he said absolutely not, that, he wouldn't expect, similarly, most judges would have somebody who knows something
Yeah.
or is,
Right.
and that, honestly, this judge has a good reputation, so he couldn't see why anyone would really object. He didn't see why this particular judge would not be someone who could compartmentalize and be unbiased.
Okay.
So I figured, had them on the phone, I may as well ask the
Right,
question
yeah.
for you. Of course.
Yeah, I'll make, I don't know if there's anything else, but yeah, I'll make a motion to give Julia the authority to sign the waiver for the, what is it, Judge
Teach out.
Teach Out to preside over this case.
Okay. I will second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I will sign that and send it tomorrow. Hopefully that will help
Right.
things move along.
I know that the other boards involved in litigations are making sure that they're in play. I think Franklin already did it.
Yeah,
He
this
had
week.
a special meeting just to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, we got it last week, but I knew we had till Friday.
Yeah,
So I was like,
yeah.
we're good.
Thankfully we had our meeting, so,
Yeah.
And Highgate meets Thursday, so it should be fine.
yeah.
Laura just had to step out quickly.
Okay.
For family, so. Do you have any other, I had put on the agenda merger transition activities. You all have been going to other board meetings. Have you been to another meeting since we met last before the holidays?
No, they haven't had one for NMV, and I think Monday is their next one. So I haven't
Right.
gotten any other updates.
Now, was that just a regular board meeting?
The one prior to the holidays?
On Monday?
On Monday, yes.
Yeah, we don't have an agenda for that yet, do we? I think they're
No.
has they've been asking, I don't even know if they've talked to you yet for principal reports?
I
Or
was,
something like an introduction. I think they had mentioned an introduction.
To your school.
Yeah.
so two things. One, I had received an email from Doreen, someone, I don't remember her last name, and I actually don't know who that is, but it just said anything for the agenda would need to be in by a certain date.
Right.
I attached a principal's report, and I sent it back, and I just said, I'm not sure if I'm expected to do this or not. That's not been communicated with me, but here it is, if I am. Then, so I've sent that in. We also received a list of where the meetings would be. So this particular one's in Bakersfield,
Yep.
and then they'll be in Montgomery or Berkshire, and then, anyway, the first one in Sheldon will be April. And so whenever we host, we're expected to put on a presentation about our school, 20 minutes or so.
That'll be nice.
So that was communicated to me, but other than that, I'm not sure what other expectations there might be.
Yeah, I think that's about, and not sitting there yet, not knowing, and I think they're still trying to figure out
Yeah.
what the vibe I got from some of the emails was they're trying to figure out how this is gonna work too. Like,
Right.
what are we gonna do at these
Yeah.
meetings with everyone there?
Well, and it's big. It's actually a pretty big
Yeah.
group, right? Because 8 board members,
4 principals.
Another
4 principals,
Yeah.
superintendent, business manager,
Mhm.
a clerk,
Mhm.
right? I mean, there's a lot of people
Yeah.
around the table.
Do the curriculum people and ECP?
They
all
didn't.
that come,
They
or-
didn't go last
Not to
time.
that
I don't
one.
know. You know, they are in the middle of, well, not in the middle, but they're in midway through a search for a director of student support services, so special ed. So I would imagine there'll be, you know, information or updates, or someone coming, you know, once they hire for that. They did reach out and asked if we had a special educator who would be interested in being on that group.
Good.
So Stacy Patel Godin replied in like 3 seconds to my forward, right? She's like, me. And so I
Good for
checked,
her.
and no one else replied. And so the next day, I just went in the special ed office. I said, did anyone else even get to see the email? And they're like, we all knew Stacy wanted you. So we're like, okay, you do it. So anyway, they were all fine with that. So she's been going. They've met twice, and then they're doing interviews next week, I think. 2 days next week.
Good.
Yep.
So that is good to have that input, no matter what. It's good to be able to help shape
Yep.
what that looks like.
At the meeting, the business manager said to Stacy, so you're not really a wallflower, are you? She's like, no, I have no problem speaking up. So her voice is definitely being heard.
Good.
Good. It should be.
Okay. Is it? Is there anything else?
No, no, it really is evolving every day, and probably will for the next little while.
You actually, you guys had a couple of meetings with the staff, I think, since our last
Yes,
meeting. How
yeah.
did those go?
So
Oh, that's
we,
right.
yep, yeah, oh, I should have put that in, I'm sorry. We had, we actually had kind of back-to-back meetings. We had a meeting with Suzanne Dermeyer from Vermont NEA, one afternoon, and then Lynn Coda came up one afternoon. And they both went well. Both meetings went well. People are really great about asking questions. There's a lot of answers that
Yeah.
aren't available.
Yeah.
So I think that's frustrating.
It was nice to be at the first meeting and to be able to say, well, that's a question you want to write down and ask Lynn Coda.
Right.
Or that's a question I don't think anybody knows, so it was
Yeah.
nice
Yeah.
to help them sort of sort out this district question versus a next district question. And
Yeah.
there are a lot of next steps.
Yep.
And that is one piece that's tough about kicking the can down the road, is that, some of the work that you really want to dig in and have side letters, or, I know negotiations is happening over there. Those kinds of things, delays confuse a little bit. But we want to support the teachers in this process to the very best we can, and so we're trying.
Yep. So.
It's got to be awful for them when
they went well.
we don't know things.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
What we did do is for both meetings, well, for any meeting we've had, we have a list of the questions that we've asked. There was someone both times taking notes. So a list of the questions we've asked, the answers, that we got, or, we don't know, right, which is often what it is, so that we can just keep track of those, and we can come back. In some cases, it is just a short matter of time before we can ask that question and get an answer. And other times it's, much further away. And then every once in a while, a question will come up that no one's really ever thought of. So we, go back and get to the Google Doc and put it on there, because, there are a number of, like smaller things that we,
Yep.
be like, oh, yeah, I don't know how that will work. Yeshua has reached out to both Robert Jarvis in Franklin Northwest, the tech director, and Dominic can't remember his last name. I'd have to look it up. Actually happens to be Robert's nephew, it's a small world, right? Who's the tech director in Franklin Northeast. So we can begin to start thinking about, all right, how do we merge or transfer Power School and VCAT and the special ed system and our Google domain and our email and our, like how's all that going to happen? Robert and Dominic reached out to the tech director from Essex, who was there when they merged Essex Town and Essex Junction, when they merged those school districts to an SU, and he's had some, he's like, well, let me tell you, here's what you don't want to do, right? So while
That's helpful.
that was a couple years ago, and there's some different things, he was able to, help them start a list of, here's some things that we didn't think about, or that, all of a sudden we're like, oh no. And so we're just trying to come up with a plan. What is that going to look like? Some things can't be done until summer. They can't be done till we're done using them.
Yep.
Other things can be, can start to change later in the year. So we're just trying to come up with a plan so that when we come back to school, things work. And we have access to
That would be great.
our resources. Yeah. Wouldn't it be? There's nothing that sets people off more than not having any technology that works.
Right.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that we're that dependent on it, but we are. So there's lots of little groups like that. Lisa Jaffe is going to Franklin Northeast for their negotiations. She's been sitting at the table for those. They really want to merge the contracts this year, which she's pretty hesitant about doing. But at least they're, she can have conversations and they can, and we did do a side by side. This is what this contract says, this is what this contract says, this is where they're different. And there's lots of places they're the same, and there's lots of places where they're different.
Yeah.
So,
It's not surprising.
yeah,
Yep.
it wouldn't be, right? So, so everybody seems to be working well together while they're also doing, their other job. I think that's what's been challenging,
Yep.
right? Is that you're already doing a job. So these are in addition, and trying to figure out when to meet.
Do you want to move to business report?
Okay, so the reason I was late was because I was fighting with the copier and it wouldn't print your financial report. And I decided just to bag it and walk out the door, but you're on track. I'm only projecting about a $10,000 to $12,000 carryover right now. But we've been talking about Medicaid plans and what's going to be reinvested for this year, so I'm not concerned. Tuition bills for semesters have been paid. Even the special ed assessment, I checked in with Becky today, and even that's on course, so I'm not concerned about anything. I will email it out probably tonight or tomorrow morning. Apologize about that, but there's nothing riveting that you need to be aware of.
Okay.
Warrants. Let's see. There's warrants for the month of December.
Is there just that one total right there?
Yes.
All right, I'd like to approve the warrants of the month of December for $263,161.24.
I will second. All those in favor of approving December warrants for $263,161.24, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And then I was, here's your bills for the month of January. The electric bill, as you know, sometimes the timing is off. So I was hoping that the board would approve us paying that when it comes in a few days. That way it doesn't miss the cycle again. Or I can email it to you when it comes in if you want to see it first. Either way is fine with us, but Sue just asked that I follow up with you. It seems to always miss the meeting by a couple
Yeah.
of days.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm comfortable.
Do you want a motion?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I'd like to make a motion for the business office to pay our electric bill when it comes in a couple of days.
I'll second that. All those in favor of paying the electric bill outside of the regularly scheduled warrants, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Laura, would it make a difference? Or is it possible to put that on the P-card cycle?
We tried to do that as much as possible in some
Yeah.
of the towns. For some reason, the utility companies, which is one of the reasons we actually got the B cards, was to
Right.
capture the rebate.
Mhm.
They have limits on how much you can pay.
Oh,
So we've run into that frequently with the fuel companies. I think it's because someone's getting charged the fees, right, and the
Right.
percentage, so there's limits.
Ah.
okay.
I don't know if I've looked into Sheldon particularly though,
Yeah.
but I know some of the bigger schools we ran into that problem, so I will look and see if that's an
Yeah.
option.
I
may have
was
already
I
done
was
that,
also
can't remember.
signing, one of the POs for, I think it was natural gas, and I was just wondering
Yeah,
if
natural
any of
gas, I have
those-
a feeling no,
No.
we're gonna be pushing the limit,
Yeah.
and I actually had lengthy conversations kind of fighting with them because I don't understand why. And I said, well, we'll even pay the fee because the rebate would actually be more than the
Right,
fee, but
Right.
no go, so.
Interesting.
um,
Yeah.
I will check in again.
In my mind, those recurring
I
costs.
know,
Right.
that
That
was
was
my
the
whole
point of
intention.
them.
That we
yeah.
know, like we know we're gonna get it, and, we can still track whether it's outside of the expected amount.
Right,
But
right,
just
and
wouldn't it
then
be
bring it to
great if
the-
it
yeah.
was,
Yeah, I can double check the amounts again. I know it was
Yeah.
definitely a problem in some of our schools, but I don't know if I've looked at Sheldon specifically, but yeah, I was a little discouraged about that. Let's see, where are we now?
We did the Act 46
Okay.
stuff, so it's really facility, I think.
For the budget, I just wanted to check,
Oh,
double back in. Chrissy, were you able to talk with athletics and just look at that? I know it's been with the holidays and everything. I'm
Yes.
sure it's been crazy.
yes and no. Yes, I brought it up, but I didn't get anything back, and I completely forgot to
Yeah.
follow up on it. So I can do that though.
Yeah.
But I did send what I was looking for.
Perfect. Okay.
And I didn't bring you a new budget draft, nothing has changed.
Right.
I haven't, well, I shouldn't say that, one thing has changed. I had neglected to include, if you remember, we were looking at full expense budgets, and one of your positions that's title funded, I had thought I put in and I didn't, and I realized that when I was responding to Morgan Daybell, the business manager, so I've added that in, but it's truly just an in and an out, so it's not concerning, but nothing else has changed since your draft 3. I did want to let you know, though, that Morgan's continuing to correspond, and so he was asking about intervention positions, different kinds of funding, any increases to any positions, which we had talked about one in the last meeting, plant and equipment lines, maintenance cycles for your plant budget. He was asking if there is. So I filled him in on those things. And he's also inquiring about some ECP stuff, as far as which teachers are currently funded and supporting Sheldon. So we continue to, have dialogue. I think he asked for your dental rates the other day too. So I mean, it's just little things,
Yeah.
but I think he's working, hard on it. So that's reassuring. So the facility is that are you done with
Yeah.
budget?
Yep.
Okay. So facility assessment, it's truly, I think I emailed this out, or Julie did, but this is what I've gotten so far. I do not have a fully completed assessment yet, and we knew that the deadline wasn't until actually the end of January. So he gave me sort of his categorized list of the items that will be included in the assessment, just for our information. I believe I also sent out a proposal for the date of the 24th. We may have to have a special meeting. He has requested that we have that meeting on that day so that we can still prepare what we need to before the 1st of February. And he said he would be willing to come to that meeting.
that would be.
That would be great.
And I think that's important, because I don't want to speak to on some of these items.
It's better, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so much better to be able to ask them directly.
Yeah, and he had hired DEW to work with him on the cost estimates, which I'm comfortable with. So I think he's doing his best to get us what we need, which I appreciate. But any questions you have, any feedback on this list, if I can get it ahead of time and send it to him. If we can share this with, I think it went to Haven, but just double checking that he's checking his email. Any questions or anything, just be the most helpful and prepare us in the best manner for the 24th if we have those to him ahead of time. Because he's working with a whole team at his office. And then on the back, I just gave you, and I did note, it's just a sample language on the bond. I just threw in a number, so please don't be alarmed about that. But this is what it will look like. So I'm ready to just plug in numbers when we get it in dates.
Yeah.
And I've shared the timeline, the necessary timeline for bonding with you previously.
Did he, when you talked to him, did he mention if he's having more conversations with the town about the road?
I don't believe that he did.
Okay.
No. I have to look at my.
Is there a plan on the parking lot or the road part?
That's what I was wondering.
Well, I know he had touched base with them, and I had shared what had come from the meeting.
Yeah.
But when I had looked through this, let me find, improve parking lot safety and capacity, use conceptual scheme A, because we had told him that was the one that you
Right.
preferred. So that was what I had shared with him. Town to pay road relocation costs. But then, yeah, so I'm not sure that he's, I think my question to him, and I'm sorry that I don't recall all of it, I'm doing this with 2 schools right now, I'm trying to remember which one is which. But I think some of it was kind of outside the scope of what we were knowing that we
Right.
could identify now and work on now, and so I think he's moving forward under that understanding that more the parking lot, not so much the movement of the
road.
access.
The road.
The road, yeah. If there's specific questions that you want, I shared what you've shared with me only. So if there's specific questions you want me to ask, or you want me to request that he formally does something, I'm happy to do that. Again, we are up against a pretty
Yep.
tight
Yeah.
timeline,
Yeah.
so I'm trying to be cognizant of that.
Yeah, no, I wondered, because I think the last time we had, at our last meeting, maybe, he was gonna talk with the town, about what they wanted to do about the road, because we had sort of heard one thing at their meeting, but
Right.
then when they had talked to him, it was a little different, and then, so I was just trying to get clear on what exactly
He has
their
not
plan is.
indicated to me that he has, I guess the last time that I requested that he do something, I had requested that I pass along the desire that he include a parking lot site A. And there were some repair and maintenance items that could be potentially repair and maintenance, not capital bond items.
Right.
And he let me know that there was some ADA issues with the bathrooms. But I don't, maybe I missed something, so if I didn't make a request that you would like me to, I'm happy to do that now. I did talk to him about, what was in this scope of work compared to the other, so that was a conversation, but.
Well, and I think, help me clarify timelines. When you meet on the 24th, you're gonna have to make a decision that day, correct?
Unless you want to meet again before the 1st of February.
Because what are the timelines for the bond?
Printing, February 1st, I have to have the first warning. I believe it's February 1st.
For it to be in
But I need
town
to be in
meeting?
town report, but the town clerks are being very, very gracious and working with us, understanding our situation, so I believe I have close to the end of the month to go to print with her.
Okay, good.
So,
I think because even the scheme A
Yeah.
had a movement of the road, and so that's why I wanted to know what exactly their plan is going to be.
and he may or may not he may engage in a certain level of conversation, but I'm not sure exactly what that level will be. He may make a request that we pursue conversations as well. He may initiate and draft his assessment based on what we've asked, but I think at a certain point, he won't be comfortable going to the select board and having those conversations either.
Yep.
But,
It felt like the conversation was really gonna be around approximately how much something was going to cost,
Yeah.
right? So if they wanted to completely relocate the
Right.
road to come out in a different place, that would be around this
X,
much
yeah.
money.
now I remember, but I think the select board was supposed to reach out to him,
Yeah, like,
actually. Now that you put it in that, I believe, so he has not mentioned to me that happened.
well, when we met here, the select board had reached out to him.
Okay.
But it sounds like they weren't clear on the plan. So I had shared the plans that he
Right.
had given us with
Right.
them. But maybe they weren't clear on what those were.
Right.
And so he was gonna connect back with them about
Yeah.
what they wanted. And I think my thought is, like, he'd be working with the select board to do any road changes, and then he'd be working with us. But our parking lot work is sort of
Maybe
dependent on what they
contingent upon-
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's really about how much money it would cost depending on what the town wants to do.
Right.
And then the real nitty gritty would happen should the bond pass and you've got a construction team and,
Right.
you know.
So I guess I'm assuming that he's working in the direction that we said around the scheme A, and
Yeah.
he's been talking to the select board in that same premise, but I will follow up with him in the morning, and just make sure that something's happening
Yeah. And
with that side of it.
if not, I mean, we can always reach out to the select board or go to another meeting, whatever we need to do. I just
Right.
want to make sure we have it all in place before that 24th.
Is there a detailed drawing of that, or just a sketch drawing?
Well, that's what we're looking for. We were looking for the town to make some decisions about where they want the road, right? So the town has to make a decision about whether they want to completely redo the road and make it straight, which is something that had come up at one of their meetings, or if they'd rather do sort of it's making the road a little bit straighter, but not like a full-on. And so we don't have plans until they make a decision about what they want to do with the road, because it's their road, right? So, depending on, what he says tomorrow, Laura, just let me know. And I
Yeah.
can find out when the next meeting is.
Do we want to schedule that meeting for the 24th, though? Because I do need to confirm that with
Yeah.
him.
What was
that
what was the timing of it? I have the 24th, but I don't have it.
I
Did we
didn't-
even
I
have a
didn't
time?
give a
Oh,
time.
not yet.
I think
That would be why.
I think he knows that your meetings typically are at the 5:30 time, but
Yeah, I can. It looks like I can make the 24th work.
Okay.
so I'll confirm that with him too.
You do that at 5:30. Okay.
I'm thinking that, I don't know how much time we'll need, but I'm assuming Hazen will be coming to that too.
I'm inviting him right now.
Okay.
So at that meeting, you'll have more of an idea of what the proposed costs for all of these areas are, so the board can then prioritize and choose, well, that sounds great, but it's a little prohibitive, it's more important to do this, or we can do it all. Okay.
Yeah, we will have a formalized phase 2 of the assessment, and if we get it before that day, I will share it.
That would be great.
But I know he's working hard to get it for us that day.
Did you have any more questions about the bond pieces, Brian?
No, did I miss the one on the budget? How much is the budget going up?
This board's not having a budget. At this point, we don't have, the Northern Mountain Valley School District will have a budget with Sheldon in it. So this board isn't adopting a budget.
At this point. Because if there's an injunction.
If
we
there's
would
an
have to-
injunction, then we start from scratch, we take the work we did before and would have a special board meeting to have a special meeting for budget. But unless there's an injunction, the Sheldon Board isn't developing a budget. The Northern Mountain Valley School District is developing the budget with Sheldon in it.
So at this point, it doesn't look like we will be voting on a budget at town meeting. It'll have to be another meeting because of the court case that's going through.
And, well, to me, we're gonna vote on the bond at town meeting day,
Mhm.
then you're gonna vote on the budget at another meeting.
Mhm.
Who's paying for the meetings? Or for the votes? If it's the Australian ballot, now it's shared with the town, but now it's gonna be a separate one. We're gonna put the bill on that?
Well, I would suspect the school will pay for the bond Australian ballot because it's our bond regardless.
Yes. I believe, so this is for what it's worth, the information we got previously for the other unified school district was that the school district would be responsible for the cost of the votes in the future, where town meeting is sort of a shared cost, because we're all doing business at town meeting together. The cost of ballots, if towns, NMVU has already decided that it's Australian ballot, so that district would have the responsibility for the cost of the ballots and the officers that, the JPs usually.
And if there was an injunction, it would still be would be the responsibility of Sheldon as well. I think that's always been the case. If there was a special meeting outside of town meeting, then the school district pays that cost, but it's minimal.
Because it would be, the budget's still gonna be Australian ballot, because that's the way it is now.
Yeah. But there won't be a school district that has the time to warn the budget vote before town meeting.
Unless NMVU is able to do that, they may
Right.
be able to.
Right.
But there wouldn't be a Sheldon specific budget at town meeting.
Because it comes out thinking, instead of a $5 million, we're gonna vote on a $25 million.
Right.
My question is, like, did ours go up 5% and theirs go up 2%? Or did everybody's go up 5%? That's where I don't know.
I'm not a business manager, but I would guess it will be hard to parse that out. I would think because there's going to be a lot of merger activity as well, like getting everybody's everything put together, that it would be hard to determine.
I'm trying to,
The biggest difference is you will no longer be your own school district that belongs to a union high school and to a supervisory union. So you won't have assessments anymore the way that they have been assessed, which was all on different rubrics previously. That will no longer be happening as part of,
They'll get assessed for Franklin Northeast in a different way.
Right, and I don't know what their rubrics are to assess. So I have no apples and apples to compare. And adding into that, I'm now showing you a full expenditure budget as if the status quo in Sheldon as far as staff and students and tuition and everything were as it is now. That may or may not be the case as you move forward. I believe it will be, but I don't get to develop that budget. So
Right.
I'm including title funded positions that have never been in Sheldon's budget before. They were funded directly through Franklin Northwest, and their revenue would just net out, and it wasn't reflected in the general fund. I don't know if they will be doing that. I don't know if they will include those in their budgets and then net their revenue out. So it would be very difficult. At some point, I want to be able to do that analysis, but we're not there yet.
Right.
We have to know what we're doing first. I do know that equalized pupil numbers have come out. For our schools, they have different versions of those calculations that the state has sent out. One if you're being forced to merge, one if you're voluntarily merged, but I've compared the numbers and they do look to be similar. It's just the way that they're presenting them is different. But equalized pupil numbers, which is what you're dividing your net ed spending by, are significantly down in Franklin, Highgate, Sheldon, Swanton, and MVU. It's a 2-year weighted average, so it's not just your enrollment from last year. But overall, including Sheldon, it's almost 90 equalized people. And they're not frozen yet, these are just preliminary, but which tells me your taxes would be going up either way.
There were a couple of things that didn't look. We got some information, did we?
Yes.
There was the.
Morgan.
None of it looked good.
No.
There was a lot of negative
Equalized
signs.
pupils
There
are
was
your
a lot of
largest
negative
impact
signs.
Yes, they are.
on your tax rate. If you lose a
Yeah.
few equalized pupils, it's detrimental to your tax rate. And so when I saw those numbers, I'm concerned because with or without a merger, this would be happening anyway. Equalized pupils are what they are.
We have negative 13.85.
Yeah, so he's looking at the same thing I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How could you get
That's
to-
a lot of, I don't want to cause concern, but 13.5 equalized pupils is going to throw your spending for equalized pupil off significantly. I'm not sure what his feedback was on that, but I'm sure he was unhappy. But it is what it is, and there's nothing you can, it's one of those things that you have no control over. It's
Right.
It's based on your enrollment and the
Equalized
needs of
pupil,
those kids.
We got the common level of appraisal.
Oh, I did bring that too.
So how does that,
Pardon me for excusing myself.
Yeah.
yes, thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
So the explanation that we got was as the CLA goes up, the equalized residential tax rate goes down.
But your
we've seen a
CLA,
decrease.
yeah, your CLA
Yeah.
went down. It's the same in most of our towns, which again, when I'm analyzing this, I just worry because CLA going down, equalized people going down, your tax rates were gonna be going up anyway. So it's gonna be difficult to separate those changes and those impacts from what's happening because of the merger.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, over there, it was the same percentage going down. All of the districts, 3.5%, everyone, the
Of,
number,
their
overall
equalized
number.
people?
Yeah,
Oh.
everyone was, it wasn't, at least an hour.
I bet ours are
well,
pretty close to the same percentages too. Yeah.
It's,
But it's enough that it's going to be noticeable.
yeah,
I do know that the new, the longitudinal data system that we're all being asked to use to report into, which is new this year, has been a challenge for all the tech directors to enter in the census information. So I'm hoping we might get another version of this equalized pupil file that maybe is a little different, because there are still schools in the state that haven't reported in the fall census. A lot of the spring census information is just coming in, which is where they're getting this. The
yeah.
state's compiling this from. But I think at a certain point, they're gonna be just like we are, and they're going to have to say, it is what it
This
is
is-
right now.
yep.
And we'll do the best we can moving forward and make changes next year if we need to. So, there's just so much going on at the state level with change, and I think they're having a hard time too.
So as far as the tax rate is gonna be with the 4 towns?
Yeah, yeah. If we are forced to merge. There's always that caveat, if we're forced to
As
merge.
it stands right now, that would be the case, per the State Board of Education's
Yeah.
direction, yeah.
And so that, in order to get that budget information, you'd have to attend the Northern Mountain Valley meetings or read their minute, that information will come from them. That wouldn't come from the work that Laura's doing for,
Indirectly it does, because
Right.
I've given their business manager what we've developed here, but what they do with it after that, and what they merge together, and how they apply revenues, and what expenses are shared differently, I don't know the answers to those. But they do have the information that this board has prepared up to this point.
Because for myself, the only thing I know is like, we have industry in the town, the other ones doesn't,
right.
so. What effect does that have on us?
Well, you're a side by side, so the only two schools that would be calculated together as far as a net ed spending calculation would be Montgomery is the other one, right?
No, we have 4.
would be L4. So Northern Mountain Valley, you'd be running a side-by-side with them, right?
No,
We're running a
we
side by
would be.
side with
with
Enosburg,
Enosburg,
Richford.
Richford.
Okay,
Northern
so it's
Mountain
a, so it would be
Valley.
all four.
Yeah.
So basically, you're gonna take all the expenses, net all the revenue for, that all of them would receive, that new school district will receive, and then you're gonna divide it by the equalized pupil numbers, and it's all, that same spending for equalized pupil will go out to all four schools, and they will apply their CLA.
So do they get, so like if you're looking at that NMV, is that, to get an equalized pupil, do they take all four and do an average? They don't take, okay.
Oh, well, not an average, they actually give you one equalized pupil number.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
And so is it the same for the common level appraisal?
No, that's the one thing that stays at the town level.
Interesting.
So everybody's spending per equalized pupil in that first blank sentence of the article would be the same, but what's going to change is, on your taxes, is the CLA.
Interesting.
That's what's going to really have an impact. People very much underestimate the value of property in the state of Vermont and the impact on their educational taxes.
Because Maple Run, it was different for each town.
Oh, that's right.
What happened when they did it last year, because of the CLA, each town had a different, so even though they all voted on the same budget, the tax increase was potentially different for each town.
Could be much different.
Right, depending on how that,
If you're at 112% versus 100%.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
but I don't remember how they reported out their budget
On the
for
bill?
Maple Run.
Oh, the budget? I
Like,
think it was like.
I think it was just a lump.
Like a summary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to Martha Gagne, who was the business manager there, and I think it was just a summary, and basically it's going to have like an instructional salary line, and it will have all your teachers in it.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
They didn't break it down.
by school, no.
Because I'm not a Fairfield employee anymore, I'm a Maple Run, so when they go that budget out there, it wasn't like what was Fairfield's piece of that, it's now,
We will have those discussions internally, and I'm assuming they will too. Like Morgan's looking at your budget. How many teachers does it take to run the Sheldon School?
Yeah.
How many? So we have to have some idea of what it costs to run this building.
right.
But the level, those discussions will happen internally only. That's what the state is asking for us to do, and look at things on a broader level and make decisions that way.
Who determines the common level of appraisal?
The state. I have your letter here. I meant to make copies, but you're more than welcome to. I can make them before I leave and hand them out, but it does talk about how the grand list impacts your CLA and how that calculation is done. I don't really want to speak to it because it's a little bit complicated, but, and I don't do it. They do it, and they send it to us. But the property values in the entire state impact this. When you had your reappraisal, how often or how historic that was has an impact.
It's been a while.
I was gonna say, I don't think they've done that in a while.
Basically, if you're at 100%, if your CLA was at 100%, it means that houses are listing for the same that they're selling for.
I see,
Yeah.
okay.
So anytime you deviate from that, then, and I think if it goes over 8% of a deviation, then they're required to reassess.
And not all these
80%,
people
I'm
is
sorry,
on the
so a
market.
CLA below 80% requires
Yeah.
a reappraisal.
Not just all determines on the market.
Right.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. When we go to these state meetings, we often talk about property values and how that impacts your tax rate, your educational tax rate that you pay. People never, most common people don't understand that property values impact your tax rate so much as far as educational tax. They think property taxes, but it's one of the biggest factors. That and your equalized pupil number. The amount in your budget, not that it's not important, because it is very important, but has minimal impact on what you actually pay in taxes.
Oh, yeah, we saw that
Yeah,
last year.
I was gonna say, yeah, we saw that last year when we were looking at,
Ridiculously painful.
It's the ed fund calculation, so it's that number that they give you to base your tax rate on, the property values and your equalized pupil numbers.
Well, and and then it goes a step further, right? Because interest rates impact property
Oh, right.
values,
Oh, yeah.
right? What
Yeah.
things sell
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
right? Higher interest rates, comes down a little bit,
Yep.
which is where we are right
It's
now.
the entire economy, yeah.
Interesting.
Gone are the days where it was just, you increase your budget $20,000, so your tax rate goes up so many cents. Like
Yeah.
I never worked here in those days. I wish I could go back in time, to be honest with you. I should have done this 20 years ago.
So, Brian, we'll continue to do updates at this meeting, with all of the moving parts, but I think if you're interested in that big budget that we've talked about, there's a meeting on Monday for Northern Mountain Valley at 5:30 in Bakersfield, where they'll talk about that budget. And of course, they're still developing it, and they're doing a lot of organizational pieces, but that's the body that will develop that budget.
But I believe they're on track, and I could be wrong, but I'm led to believe that they're on track to launch a budget for vote on town meeting day.
Okay.
So unless something has changed, I believe that was what they were intending to do.
But to me, it's one of the things, it's like, you got 4 different towns and, well, our spending went up 10% and the rest of them goes up 2%, it's like, how come we have to fund 8% of theirs?
It would be the
That's
other way,
part we
actually.
don't know, and I won't know.
It actually would be the other way. If you're going up 10% and they're only all going up 2%, they're gonna help you pay for your increase. So it works both ways.
Right, I realize that, but I'm thinking, I'm paying for your 8% higher than
Right.
mine.
Right.
That's one of the issues, and the reason that a lot of towns have joined this lawsuit is because there is that loss of local control. And you're paying for bills in other towns, and I think the state would like to see towns think as a district, as a group of schools, and that's not how we've traditionally done things, and so that's gonna be a huge shift.
Cause I know for ourselves, we have one place that pays like 20% of our taxes.
Right.
Just one person pays 20% of what's due.
Yeah. Right, and the way taxes are, and the way the taxes are spread out in different towns is
Cause the other
different.
one, they don't, no one person pays that much and the other ones.
Right, right.
The goal would be with merging is that, I mean, they want all towns to be more prudent in their spending.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you don't have towns, because even when towns spend out of whack, it does affect all of us.
But it already did.
It did. But this one, I think they're trying to keep the goal is to keep the spending down. I think this first year, and maybe the first couple of years, if we're merged and all this happens, it's gonna be really confusing to explain the budgets to people. Then if we're in this new district, it'll be more clear, because then you'll have like the apples to apples. Okay, this is what this Northern Mountain was this year, and then you'll be able to at least see a clearer connection. But the first couple of years, figuring out as potentially staff, and they work everyone in and fixing it, it's
If you
gonna
didn't have
be
that
murky.
assessment piece, it would be so much easier. But because you assess on any way you agree upon, and we have 3 assessments that are all assessed differently, and you will no longer be sharing those shared costs, I'm now calling them shared costs, with us, but you'll be sharing all those shared costs with them.
Yeah.
It's like a watermelon and an apple. There's no way, you can't compare the two, and their revenues are different, and how they apply their revenues will be different. So you're exactly right. Once you establish that baseline again,
Yeah.
and then over the course of the years. But I do try to remind people of 2 things. The Ed Fund has been one Ed Fund for years now, and we have been sharing in the increases of other towns for years now. So those 10%, 12% increases that have been happening over other towns in the state have been shared for a while. So the idea of sharing with these other towns and developing a budget that way, it sounds crazy, but truly on a much higher level, it was already happening anyway. This is just much more in your face, kind of, obvious. And also, I do think, I'm not advocating for anything, but just these are kind of the pros, if Sheldon had a huge excess cost, or you're bonding right now, those payments are going to be shared.
So you won't have the peaks and valleys that some of our schools have. So if you had 3 super high need kids move in and it hit your budget $150,000, $200,000 and you just have to absorb it, you will have those other towns to help absorb that cost. And when it happens to them, yes, you will be sharing that out as well. But after a while, over the course of 10, 20 years, you won't see these giant peaks and valleys in your tax rate calculation anymore. It should sort of even itself out, and sometimes that's easier to handle over time. Yes, it'll just keep going up, but you won't have like, 20 cents one year and then 2 cents, then 20 cents, and then it should theoretically start to be easier to plan for.
Is that the part you're gonna be able to tell me at the vote, or you won't be able to tell me that?
Which vote? On town meeting day?
Well, whenever the budget goes through, is how much the tax rate would be.
No. Your spending per equalized pupil is how much and that multiplied by your CLA is what your tax rate will be. How much the budget goes up is important to know, depending on where that budget lands, but that's not going to directly correlate necessarily to there is a chance right now, just like last year and the year before, that your budget could go down and your tax rate could still go up because of the calculation. And that happened last year in a few towns.
Like last year, we made some significant cuts, and didn't see that in our tax rate.
Right.
It was incredibly
Because your
frustrating.
equalized pupils went down, the yield went up. I mean, there's just,
Yeah.
your CLA probably was the same as it is this year. The same situation.
So I think it's important as we move forward for boards and just for taxpayers, you should be keeping an eye on your school's budget just to make sure money's being spent appropriately, but it won't necessarily affect your tax rate.
But then it's hard, to me, it's hard to keep track of it when I'm dividing it by 4.
Yeah.
How much did each one of you pay?
Right, and it won't be, like we said, it won't be reflected that way anymore either. It won't be split out by school, it will just be, this is what it costs for all the teachers in all 4 schools together, and you won't see it split out. So, it'll be a much different landscape moving forward. Any more questions? We don't have very clear answers.
Any more questions that we can't answer for you?
When does all the money transpose?
So if there's not an injunction, the new district will start July 1st.
And whatever carry over or whatever is done July 2nd?
Everything will go and now belong to that new school district, theoretically, but there are possibilities in the Articles of Agreement to allow for different funds to be protected and that have been clearly earmarked for a specific purpose within a school to continue that. For instance, some of our schools have playground funds or student activity funds that are clearly, or certain Medicaid funds that are specifically earmarked for a purpose. The purpose can continue even though the funds now belong to this new entity, but the intention can stay the same. But your general fund dollars will be merged.
Well, the state, instead of paying Northwest, would pay Northern Valley, or whatever it is?
Yep, all the money will go into one. And there will be one treasurer and one clerk. And that's how we will be also, people we're trying to find.
What happens to the town treasurer? Disappears?
No, the town treasurer is much different than the school district treasurer. Right now, they happen to be the same person. But for instance, right now, we have a supervisory union that has a treasurer and a clerk, and those are elected, well, it's Becky and myself that are the treasurer, but appointed, I should say. We're appointed positions, and that will be sort of the same. This person will actually need to be voted on, though. It will be an elected person. But no, there will still be your town treasurer and clerk, but there will be a school district for the new district, a treasurer and a clerk. But there will be one, not 4 or 5 or 6. We're assuming that the town will still receive those funds.
because I think it has to run through the town because of the common level of appraisal and those aspects, but that's still, no one has announced that yet.
I'm just looking at the articles of agreement for NMV to see if there's anything in there about those special funds. Any and all operating deficits and/or surpluses and fund balances shall become the property and the obligation of the Franklin Northeast Pre-K 8 NMV.
Yep, that's the standard language.
Yep.
That's your general fund, though. I have to believe, and I don't know, but I have to believe in the same, and what will be in our case, I believe, is that things like student activities where you're doing internal fundraising within your building so that you can pay for, it may not, things like field trips and things that are part of the, like, almost the instructional, like, curriculum might move into a general fund, but the things, I'm trying to think of something else, it's like your PTO. I believe that we will remain the control of the people within the Sheldon School and the PTO. You're not gonna take those funds and say, well, you raised, $10,000 in Sheldon, but this other town gets to have some of that.
Right.
I mean, this isn't, so it's different than the general fund.
Yeah.
And we have a couple different funds that are just different. The Dunsmore Fund and the Miller Fund.
Right,
Is that part of the
those-
school?
They are, but they will become under the ownership of this new school district, I believe, but I think the intent doesn't change. What they're allowed to be spent on should not change. Because those were clearly earmarked for a specific purpose. All of them have rules about how they can be spent. Usually only the principal can be spent, the interest, not the principal. So Julie is advising us that those things would be staying.
It's one of them things, when it was done 15 years ago, that wasn't thought of.
Right.
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 So it kinda, it's one of them things. Did he say it or did she say it?
Well, no, because most of them have very, like I said, very clear intentions. And
But is the intention the same thing today as it was back 20 years ago?
yes, because the person who donated the money was very explicit on how the money could be spent. And so if that's the case, then I believe legally we still have to abide by that. It's the same thing when we have schools that are asking for donations for playground. If you're collecting and soliciting donations for a playground, they should only be spent on a playground. I mean, I think legally even that would probably stand up, that was the intention when people donated money. It's just technically it will belong to the new entity.
Right. Okay. All right. Nice.
Are we gonna have a special meeting on the bond thing, or is that not gonna?
The 24th,
Yeah, so we're gonna have a meeting on the 24th at 5:30 to, hopefully with Peter Cross, to review the phase 2 of the proposal, to look at cost and see how much we're gonna put to voters, or how much the bond will be, and what priorities we have within that.
But is that meeting for the public or meeting just for the board, you say?
It's an open meeting. I don't see, I don't think there will be things that we need to go into executive session for, but if there is, we will, but otherwise, it's a warned open meeting.
Right.
And then, I would anticipate prior to town meeting, we will have,
an information meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will.
That we
That's why I
might-
was just looking for my timeline.
we'll have a bond information meeting, we may combine it with the schools, but it sort of depends on what happens with the budget and.
And everything has to be warned separately when you have a bond, so even though
Okay.
you can piggyback and have them at the same time, everything has to be warned separately, so if you move forward with a bond, and barring any more changes, it would be probably the last week in February, around the 25th of February is what the timeline would need to be.
Okay. Okay. Are you ready to move on to principal's report?
All right. Oh, it's not up there. Okay. On Monday, so yesterday, Yeshua and Lori presented to teachers across FNWSU some professional learning that we've been doing around standards-based instruction. They unpacked the best practices in standards-based instruction, focusing mostly on when teachers present content. So what does it look like, and what's some of the best practices and strategies around previewing new content, helping students process new content, using questioning to help students elaborate, and then reviewing content. That's part of a series that all of the instructional coaches in the district are doing, and each month they're held at a different school. And teachers get to sign up. It is part of, it's voluntary. So I think there was like 12, or no, there was more than that, probably 15 teachers on Monday, and they can earn hours toward their relicensure. That went really well, and they got some good feedback. Excuse me. We had our Title I, our school-wide Title I afternoon presentation, and the same day that we did a holiday lunch and our concert. There were so many people who came that day. It was amazing. We actually really ran out of chairs in the for the concert. We were pulling chairs. We had students in classes, and we said, sorry, you're going to have to stand. And we took their chairs. We took the chairs out of my office, like everywhere. The only thing we didn't bring is these wooden ones.
Just probably a safety.
We don't like to move them around too much. But we really moved everything, and there was a lot of people here. But there were also a lot of parents who came for our earlier workshops. Nice. And we did a workshop on Prodigy and Raz Kids, which are 2 online programs that students can log into and have specific content around math or literacy that is geared to their level, and how kids can access that at home, even on a device like a phone in some cases. And then how to, Lori did a presentation on reading to your children, but specifically around math books. Like reading a book that a fictional book, but around math, and then what kinds of questions you could ask to kind of bump up the rigor in those while you're reading those. In the classroom, we did a lot of modeling around math games. So what are some of the kinds of games that you can play with your kids that just help to reinforce some of the work that we're doing? There are, like I said, lots of parents. There was we didn't keep track of how many individual parents, but we did keep track of student families. So there are 155 student families who came, which could mean a number of people in a family, right? So mom, dad, sometimes grandma and grandpa, right? In a case, an aunt and uncle, right? I mean, like lots of people. But 155 student families. We did have a survey that people could fill out around, not around the concert or the meal, but around the workshops that they went to. And 100% of the people who participated in the survey felt the information they received was useful, and 69% said they were more likely to increase the time they read with their children based on the information they got, which is really great feedback. This is just a disclaimer about Title I schools and why because we used some of our Title I, school-wide Title I money to purchase math games and books to give to families after the workshop, right? So you went to this workshop, here's the information you received, here's a game to go home and play with your kids, which is exactly what one of the strategies that Title I wants you to use, because it's about creating partnerships with your families. because we're a school-wide Title I school, we can do that for all of our students, as opposed to if you're a targeted Title I school, then you can only invite certain families, and it would be some of your families in poverty. And so it's just a lot harder to do those kinds of things when you can only send out invitations to certain people. So being school-wide is always great because everyone can come, and it really helps all our kids. We also did a reflection around our PLCs. PLC stands for Professional Learning Communities. Our teachers work in professional learning communities around math, around literacy, and around social emotional learning. Those are grade level teams with our interventionists are involved, our special educators, and any of our other special teachers are involved in those PLCs. We kind of stopped in the middle of the year to do a little reflection, like how are we doing in our PLCs? Are we following our norms? Do we have norms we need to change? Is there anything that we need to tweak in order to make this time worthwhile? Like I said, we do it 3 times a week. So it's, they're in these groups a considerable amount of time. The 4 goals of PLC is what do we want students to know? How will we know when they know that? How will we respond when some students don't know? And the other side is how will we extend learning for students who already do? And then the one that we've been kind of pushing on this year especially is how can the work we do in our PLCs increase the collective efficacy of our staff? So how can we get better by working together in these ways? So that PLC reflection data was really good. We did the reflection, and then we met in PLCs to kind of look through that data and make any tweaks or changes that we thought was important. There is a competitive AOE grant out there right now around restorative practices. I know that there's a few people in the building who are really interested in restorative practices. Not sure it's the right next best step for Sheldon, but I wanted to put it out there because I wanted to see school-wide, what are people thinking? So when I sent out the Monday memo, I put a couple different links. So if people were like, I'm not really sure I know what restorative practices is, and or how it's different from restorative justice, because they aren't the same. And so if people were wondering, they could check that out. But then just what are some people's thoughts? What are some questions that people have? Like I said, the grant is competitive. It's a lot of work. I'm totally willing to do that work if that's what the school as a whole really feels like that's a good next direction. I didn't really have a sense if they did or not. And I don't yet either. The grant's not due till April, so this is just beginning the conversation. But I thought there were some really great questions that they already have started to come up with, and this was just like in less than a day, right? So other people have gone on and added to this document. But Highgate has done some work in implementing restorative practices. So how are they doing? What is their? How do teachers feel about it? How do students feel? How do parents feel? Chris Palmer, the assistant principal in Highgate, has led a lot of that work. So some people wondered if maybe he could come and just chat with our staff about what he's seen or what he thinks about it. Baker's, we asked, do any of the NMV schools implement restorative practices? And Bakersfield does do that. And then, one of the thoughts was that we do need to do some more work with our students in the area of social emotional learning, especially at that universal tier 1 level. And the phrase that kind of kept coming up is like, if something goes wrong, how do we repair that? It's one thing for, okay, this student did this and this student had a consequence. right? But how do we fix that in the whole class? Because it probably impacted a lot of the class. What do we do to acknowledge that? And then how does it pair with PBIS? That's a great question. And then is there a way to look at responsive classroom and then the kind of the middle school version called developmental designs more intentionally? If we did that, if we really looked back at responsive classroom, would we need to do restorative practices, or are they kind of the same thing? And then how is restorative practices connected to what we know about building resiliency in our schools? So lots of great questions, and this gives us a nice place to go next, which is, to kind of dig in a little bit more, find out a little bit more, and narrow down what we think our next best step should be. Tomorrow at our staff meeting, Carrie Hatch, our school-based behavior consultant, I sat with her today and we worked through some, she's going to present some behavior data from when she started, which was actually the same year I started. She just started in the middle of the year. But so we have 4 years of data, and present that and say, where have we really gained some ground? Where are we doing well, and what places are we still, are there things that we're missing? And what can we do about that? So those things are kind of hand in hand, right? Let's talk about restorative practices and building resiliency, but then also let's look at our data and see what is it that we need. So we'll start that work tomorrow. And then actually our February 4th in-service is all about making a plan for next year. So it's about making some decisions about our continuous improvement plan based on all of this data that we've been looking at for about a month now. The doors on K4 wing were installed over break, so you can walk down and take a look at the beautiful looking hallway. But there was a mix up with the door handles, and those are still on order. There is specific handles you have to have. You have to have a lever. You can't have a round handle. You're supposed to have a lever handle, and it has to be able to lock from the inside without a key. So it either needs to have a push lock or the turn lock, and then keyed on the outside. But and when and so all that was given, all that information was given. But when they came in, they were a key lock on both sides. So you could lock it from the inside, but you had to have a key, which that's not helpful. A kindergartner is not going to have the key to the door. So we had to send those back. And I don't know why it takes so long for handles to come in, but apparently it does. So we actually contacted a couple different vendors, and we should know tomorrow. And if they don't come in within a week, then we're looking at some temporary handles to put on, because actually the doors are really heavy and they're kind of hard to open without a handle on them, right? One, if you're going in, you can just push them.
Right.
But if you're going out, you have to stick your fingers in the empty hole and pull them, and it's kind of awkward. And so. And, half of the students down there are they're smaller than the door handle. Yeah. So it's problematic, but it does look really good. The teachers have already noticed a huge change in terms of the noise level, which obviously that makes sense. So we have lots of ski days coming up. We had one yesterday. We had one on the 15th. And the 29th, we do 6 ski days total. I don't know why we had a bunch in January, but I think it's because we only had one in December. And then in service on the 21st, on MLK Junior Day. We always have in service. And then February 4th is a half day in service. So that's about it.
So move down our superintendent's report. We have some future board meeting dates. Our next Sheldon School Board meeting is February 12th at 5:30. The next Franklin Northwest Board meeting is February 6th at 6:30 in Swanton. We will have our Sheldon Bond meeting on January 24th at 5:30. And there is also a Northern Mountain Valley Union board meeting on Monday at 5:30 in Bakersfield. So,
Just a couple meetings.
yes.
Mhm.
Is there anything else for anybody? No? Okay.
A couple things I just wanted to tell you.
Anything else you want, Sean?
No, just trying to write all my meetings down.
Okay.
I don't really trust my calendar anymore either because things keep changing.
I
So
know,
I'm like,
I
is
know.
that really happening today?
I know.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the Sheldon School Board meeting at 7:11.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn the board meeting.
I will second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.